It was shaping up to be Alpine's greatest race of the season, with Pierre Gasly finishing 6th and staying inside of the DRS range of a Ferrari, ahead of the Esteban Ocon climbing into the points after qualifying just outside of the top 10. But suddenly, everything went horribly wrong. After the second restart, tragedy struck when Ocon and Gasly collided, forcing team principal Otmar Szafnauer to determine who was to fault. What happened? Let's go ahead and discuss it. After being balked by Carlos Sainz, who was tangled with Fernando Alonso, Pierre Gasly went to the grass at turn 3. As the Frenchman returned to the track and sought to regain racing speed, he drifted over to take the racing line and collided with his teammate. Ocon had been attempting to follow Yuki Tsunoda through, but as the AlphaTauri passed, the distance tightened on Ocon, resulting in a collision that pushed both pink cars into the barriers. Well, they each apologised, so they each believed they had a hand in it, their team principal explained after the race. It was simply craziness out there. If Pierre hadn't gone wide in turn 1, which a lot of drivers did, I think he'd be higher up the road. Esteban simply followed Tsunoda through on the racing line at the same moment, and Pierre didn't see him and came over to the racing line and just struck him. That's unfortunate. Szafnauer was careful not to assign blame too fast, owing to his previous experience managing teammate disagreements, especially with Ocon at Force India Racing Point. It's a shame they got together. Blaming one or the other is not the correct thing. The appropriate thing to do is learn from it. There's a lot of chaos there and you must make rapid judgments. According to the onboard and playback, Tsunoda gets past and Esteban Ocon tries to pursue him. You never know what Pierre will do, and he's just trying to get back to the racing line. It's not like he's looking in the mirrors and seeing someone and thinking, oh, I'm going to block him. He's looking the other way, getting on the racing line thinking no one is there. The stewards investigated the collision and determined it was a racing incident, taking no further action, much to Alpine's satisfaction. Gasly now has 10 penalty points, an additional 2 might result in a 1-race ban for the Frenchman. That was definitely a racing incident, confirmed Szafnauer, who is responsible for something like that. In retrospect, you could think, great, shouldn't have crashed, but there are times when you can't prevent it, when things happen in front of you, and you have to decide, I either run into this or run into that, because you can't avoid it. Alpine has slid to 6th in the constructors' rankings after failing to earn any points for Sunday. With McLaren leapfrogging them for their double-point finish, the Australian Grand Prix was done as a race as Max Verstappen flew by Lewis Hamilton like a jet plane taking flight, while a cancelled opponent stayed motionless. Even on a circuit where Red Bull suffers with tyres as much as the rest of the field and had braking issues last weekend, there was no chance of further action in the race for the victory. And things had seemed so wonderful for the neutral at the beginning. Nevertheless, when the second red flag instantly erased Verstappen's lead, Hamilton had no 2023 title prospects to consider while considering a dive into turn 1. Add in the unstoppable Fernando Alonso in the background and you have a lethal combination. 3 champions of combustion, far better than a safety car conclusion or an early outcome. During the early parts of the Australian Grand Prix, the Thai driver was racing in 6th place. After a strong qualifying session at race start, he appeared to be on track to finish comfortably inside the top 10. On lap 7 though, a chance to finish off a superb weekend for the 27-year-old was destroyed. The Williams driver skidded wide into turn 6, crashing into the barrier at turn 7 before spinning back onto the circuit. After dropping out of the race, the first red flag of the race was raised, the first of several contentious red flags waved during the race. Albon's red flag sparked considerable debate, with George Russell and Carlos Sainz pitting beneath the safety car before the red flag was deployed. Williams had been quite strong in Sector 2 all weekend. Albon set multiple purple sectors in Sector Toe throughout qualifying using their straight line speed. Nevertheless, after reviewing the data, Albon claims that the rear tyres on his Williams FW44 were excessively hot, as reported by motorsport.com. I looked at the data and it seemed unusual. I went through the turns slower than the prior lap, but got through the preceding bend faster. As a result, I drove around turn 5 a little faster and used a little more exit curb. I believe it raised the tyre temperatures on the left side somewhat. So I drove into turn 6 with a hotter rear left tyre, and that was the end of it. I mean, those are the margins we're working with. Williams head of vehicle performance David Robson explained that the tyre temperature rise was caused by a short snap of oversteer at turn 5. The collision, according to Robson, was a lost opportunity for the squad. According to the Brit, Albon was on track for a comfortable top 10 finish. Unfortunately, high-speed contact with the curb in turn 5 caused a slight snap and a spike in tyre temperature, causing him to lose the car at the following round, Robson added. The Thai driver stated that he did not want to make excuses for his accident. Instead of blaming the tyre temperature increase, he admitted to driving into the wall. "It's my fault," he said. "I'm upset with myself, it's quite disheartening, and of course I feel particularly awful for the squad. It seems like I've let them down. We had a decent vehicle, and looking at the results and the fact that there were a few DNFs, we might have been one of the teams collecting points." Albon was one of many drivers from Williams to withdraw at the Australian Grand Prix. Logan Sargent would exit the race on the restart, which was red flagged following Kevin Magnussen's retirement. The rookie American went too much into turn 1. This forced him to collide with AlphaTauri driver Nyck de Vries, ending both races. With 8 drivers withdrawing from the race, gaining some points was an excellent opportunity. Kevin Magnussen spun out and left debris on the course, resulting in a late red flag. It meant 2 racing laps before a standing restart on the grid, leaving everything to play for in the race between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. Yet the actual action would take place further back. Verstappen held off Hamilton's attack into the first curve, but then the chaos began. Fernando Alonso was on pace for 3rd place again when he was turned around by Carlos Sainz, leaving him enraged and afraid that his podium had been stolen. Yet that wasn't the end of the story. Alpine also suffered a setback when their 2 drivers collided. Due to the tight space on the track, Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly could not avoid colliding, and both crashed into the wall and were eliminated from the race. Farther back, Logan Sargent and Nyck de Vries made contact, leaving the 2 of them trapped on the gravel. Sergio Perez had also gone off the track to avoid being caught up in the chaos, but his decision proved sensible as he emerged uninjured. Following a considerable delay, the decision was made to restart the surgery. It was excellent news for Alonso, who reclaimed 3rd place despite getting thrown around and losing it earlier in the race. He was permitted to continue since his automobile was still moving under its own power. It meant that the order would be reset to what it was at the last restart, and that any overtakes made during the brief period between the green light and the massive multi-car crash would be ignored. And with no racing laps remaining, that order would remain unchanged with no passing permitted. After all, Verstappen won the race with Hamilton 2nd and Alonso 3rd. Sainz finished 4th but was penalised 5 seconds for triggering the incident with Alonso. It meant Lance Stroll would inherit 4th place at the conclusion of the race, Perez 5th, and Lando Norris 6th. Nico Hülkenberg finished 7th after having risen to 4th throughout the course of the race, infuriating Haas CEO Guenther Steiner. Oscar Piastri finished 8th to earn his maiden Formula 1 point in his home race, while Zhou Guanyu finished 9th and Yuki Tsunoda finished 10th. Thank you for stopping by to watch. Please subscribe to the channel and post your video recommendations in the comments area if you want us to do more videos like this.